Welcome, everyone. We're very glad to have you in the sanctuary at the Davis Unitarian Universalist Church. It is August 19th, and we are doing a Life Odyssey recording of Gale, Sosnick. My name is Susan Steinbach, and I will be the moderator today. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how the structure of the event will go. Gale is our first presenter today. We will film her and have a conversation with her and listen to her journey. At the end of that, there will be a time for questions and answers with the audience. So please save some of those burning questions for that time where Gale can interact with you. Then there will be a short break, and we will move on to the second Life Odyssey presenter, Joan Steck. So let's get started, shall we, Gale?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to give a very brief introduction to Gale. I think many of you have known her for a long time. I see many church members that have interacted with her in ways over the years, and we're really glad that you are here today. Gale has been active in the UU Church of Davis congregation since the late 1950s. Although she wasn't among the founders, she arrived on the scene when the sanctuary was only half finished. She raised a family of 4 children with her husband Steve, whom she met at UC Berkeley. 2 of the children are in the audience today, Randall and Elika, with their husband Mike and daughter Erin. Welcome. Gale taught religious education classes in the Bridge House in the 1960s, alongside church member Sue Ayer and others. And she will tell you a story about that Bridge House today that's quite intriguing. There are other details in store for us as we listen to Gale today about her most productive life journey. Please welcome Gale Sosnick. Yes, Gale, would you begin by telling us about your childhood in New York and New Jersey?
All right. I believe that life is a matter of luck. I was blessed with luck. My father, not so much. He was the second child of a tailor from Russia who eked out a living from his home in Philadelphia. English was his second language. His mother died he was 13, and he had to go to work after 6th grade. But somehow he managed night school and became an accountant in his early 20s, and he made his luck. My mother was also a child of immigrants from Romania. Their English was good. Her father was an insurance agent. She graduated West Philly High and worked briefly in a realtor's office. Before she died, she said, "I always wanted to do the right thing. I always did my best." And that was the ethics of the household. God was not even mentioned. In her 80s, she revealed that she once taught Sunday school, and she was confirmed. "Did you read and write Hebrew?" I asked. "Oh, yes." I took down a Bible and told her to read. I was astounded that she saw after all these years. I was lucky in my childhood. Although I was born the year of the Great Depression, my father had a job with Macy's in New York. I had few clothes bought at discount stores, and I do so now, but I was always properly dressed. I had to speak and act properly, for my mother said people made general opinions on few examples, for America was anti-Semitic. The only holiday we celebrated was Thanksgiving. We lived in a new 4-block housing project in North Bronx for low-income people. The milkman came with a horse and wagon across Boston Post Road, the oldest cobblestone street in the U.S., at the light for crossing. That was at the corner. The cobblestones were there 30 years later when, on our way home from Europe, I wanted to show my children where we lived. It was a four-story walk-up with 2 units on the floor. The washing machines were in the basement, and the clotheslines were on the roof. I enjoyed throwing snowballs from it on the people below. A half a block was devoted to playground and community building, in which I took ballet lessons. For violin lessons, I had to take the bus at the end of the subway line to the Lower East Side, and there were immigrants' push carts in the streets. Every Sunday, weather permitting, we went somewheres: the zoo, museum, a park. New York was a great place to be poor. When my father's income went up, he was asked to leave, and my mother located a small, for New York, 1,500 students, where 90% of the students went to college. I had been playing with wood anagrams to make floor plans of houses, and I kept a folder of magazine pictures of houses I liked. I was the first member of my family to go to college. I didn't even know where my alternatives were. I found Pratt, an engineering and art school in Brooklyn, which took 40 students in the architecture program, 2 of them designated for women. The application was a test of my 3-dimensional ability and could I draw in perspective, and as I was in.
That's quite a story, being only one of 2 women in this group of 40 classmates, an accomplishment early in life. So with that engineering background behind you at Pratt, something very important happens to your father at this point after the war and his transfer to San Francisco. So will you tell us about that part of your journey?
He was transferred to junior executive at Macy's, and I enrolled in Berkeley. My mother advised that I was had a better marriage when I married somebody of my cultural background, and so I joined a Jewish sorority. One day a sister said to me, would I want to go to a debate? Berkeley was debating Stanford. I, of course, said yes. The 4 participants were dressed in tux. The subject was a belief in a deity necessary for morality. After I went up to meet the debaters and we chatted, Steve asked for a date Saturday night. On Wednesday, he called. He couldn't wait. Would I go Christmas caroling on campus? And movies followed for Hot Lemonade and in the future, and we had parties, debate parties, fraternity parties, and after a year, after a year, he offered me his fraternity pin. That was the thing that students had for instead of a formal engagement. I was lucky he wanted to marry me. His large family welcomed me, and as I was introduced to synagogues and bar mitzvahs. It was the most important decision of my life. I didn't get everything. He went off to his chess matches and volleyball, and I found friends to go to the galleries and trips abroad. But it was good for 63 years. We were married in Temple Emmanuel in San Francisco, and Steve wore his debate tux. Afterwards, Steve had a year of law school behind him, but he wanted to change to a PhD program in economics. We rented a 3-room furnished cottage without closets in Berkeley near the tracks. I had him help me with wallpaper wisteria vines on our bedroom ceiling and New Yorker cartoons in a bathroom wall. The living room was taken over by a ping pong table where he worked. and I went to work.
All right, so that was quite exciting times in Berkeley and San Francisco, meeting the debater, wearing a tux, and the first date involving doing some Christmas carols in that Jewish background. It's quite a story in that part of your life, Gale. Will you tell us now about your journey going to Princeton, New Jersey?
After 3 years, had an offer to a lectureship at Princeton. So we drove with everything we owned to a converted barracks apartment. The 2-foot kitchen counter was no improvement in Berkeley, but I bought used furniture and it was home. I typed his thesis and we started the family. Beryl was born the second year, and I didn't want to wish my only childhood on her, so we had Elika 1 week before her first birthday. Time to get a tenure-track job.
All right, your family's been started. You have 2 daughters that have been born. And now, from Princeton, you're moving back to Davis, California. Please tell us about that.
Steve had an offer to the Ag Econ department in Davis. It was perfect. Close, but not too close to family. The time we flew, 2 weeks Elika slept, but 12-month Beryl went up and down the aisles saying hi to everyone. In Davis, lots were available on Elmwoods Drive. We were lucky, and I planned my dream house. I wanted to get the square footage we thought that we would need, so the finishes would be upgraded as we could afford them. We painted as part of a down payment. I can remember standing on a ladder painting the 11-foot room ceiling in the living room, pregnant with Randall. I had Tobin 2 years later. I would be in charge of the house and yard. I had 2 other commissions on Elmwood Drive for people we knew, and I usually had house plan on my drawing table off and on. The Foyticks and Hedges were our senior members of the Aggie department, and they introduced us to the Unitarian Church. It was a perfect fit, and it became my extended family. I liked the mix of people. The services were creative, and singing moved me. Steve never did understand the word spiritual, but he was supportive. Charles Slapp was then the Unitarian minister, and he founded the chapter of ACLU in Yolo County, and Steve was active in the civil rights movement in the 60s.
So I want to just highlight the mentioning of some other early church families, the Hedges and the Foyticks. Dorothy Foytick has also given her life Odyssey, so these relationships go back decades on Elmwood Drive, which was the center of early faculty life in the 50s and 60s. So I'm glad that your family was a part of that.
Right, and I was lucky because I never heard the Unitarian Church before. And
so how did you find us?
To my surprise, I noticed cultural differences in values from UU. One, I don't love everybody. That is reserved for my family and friends. I have people I care for, don't like, and hate. I hate the Ku Klux Klan, and I gather the feeling is mutual. But I treat people respectfully. It makes no sense to have a word meaning what you choose to mean at the moment. Number 2, I don't forgive without remorse unless the hurt was not deliberate. I don't feel guilty, and if I offended someone, I apologize. Yom Kippur is when you ask people for forgiveness. 3, I judge other people's actions, but not before I walk in their shoes. How else would you have standards? And 4, I am opinionated, but I will change my mind if people offered evidence and facts contrary. I come from a debating household. I hate it when others do the same. I never challenge a person on their beliefs and religion.
All right, that's very pointed. I like that. 1, 2, 3, 4. listing of clarity of your values. So, Gale, let's talk now about some of the building projects in the early church here.
Yeah, I was involved with several building projects. The interior of the cottage, which we moved to the university, was turned into a house for a caretaker, and I designed the interior walls. I taught Bill Strain to build the bridge house, and the design of the Great Hall, which was a connection of the kitchen and the sanctuary.
So Bill Strang at that time was building a series of houses in subdivisions in Davis. So the fact that he built one standalone house out here in the county was a very unique arrangement.
And he regretted it because it was inefficient.
How about some of your religious education activities?
I considered the plea for a teacher with Sue Eyre to teach 5th and 6th grade because they had a vacancy. You had class lessons. I remember holidays and holy days for 3rd and 4th grades. It was easy for the teachers who had some background, and I did not. I was 1 week behind my students doing research. When I asked my class who knew who Jesus was, one hand went up, and I vowed I would address the ignorance. How can you not know your own culture? I began with the common Bible stories: story, message, and activity. For Passover, I had a real Seder. For the church across the street curriculum, we visited a church every other week, discussed what we saw, and had a craft the next. We even gave a play with Christmas carols telling the story. The church director program had quit, and I took over for 6 years, and I never looked back.
That's really quite amazing, Gale, that you jumped right into religious education when you saw this opening, this need for the 3rd and 4th graders, and the fact that you took these 3rd and 4th graders to visit other religious sites, sanctuaries, etc.
Other religions fascinated me, and this year I visited the local mosque for a service in the Sikh temple in Sacramento. It is an interesting subject.
So it's something that's in your blood, apparently. That's quite remarkable. All right. I also like the fact that you were learning alongside the children and that you felt you were only 1 week ahead of them in planning the curriculum.
And I knew more than my relatives, and I irritated them.
You irritated your relatives?
Because I read up and I was interested in the subject.
That's really quite unique, quite unique. I think you'd like to tell us now about your 4 favorite words.
My 4 favorite words are compassion to all people in plight, to responsibility, first for yourself, your family, and your community. This involves a lot of volunteer work or money. I had a campfire group for several years, and I even served on the design review and the historical commissions for many years in the city. Too many things for me to mention. I love small town life. In New York, the expression is, go fight at City Hall. Joy. I get it from making things that I am proud of. Stained glass windows.
Keep going.
That was my first project. I dared to choose. No, that was a painting of mine.
Watercolors first.
Watercolors and acrylics, and jewelry making with wasp wax I carved and was cast, and decorating flower arranging as a hobby, and the stained glass window was to insulate the single pane glass for my living room window. Some of my paint. That one is a collage. I took the National Geographic and cut pictures of it. And it takes more time than a painting, but I enjoyed the process. And this one was named New Year's Day, the day after. And
day after the party.
This is a watercolor. It's supposed to be water and a reflection, and it doesn't show. And when my favorite flower one.
That's beautiful. That hangs in your entryway, correct?
I used to go to this county fair, and I got lots of ribbons. And the last year, I got a best of show, and for my landscapes. And I had first prize for my
flower
arrangements.
Yes.
And I no longer need more ribbons, and I don't drive, and I still paint periodically.
Gale, let me ask you, how many years have you been doing flower arranging?
I don't know, but I have the church. I don't know.
Since the 60s here in Davis?
No, not that
Not that far back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for the church, we've been graced with many beautiful bouquets up here.
It's fun.
Okay. Now we have the metallic one up on the screen, Gale.
I have gratitude as the fourth thing. I know how much I have lucked out in life. I had 2 of 5 grandchildren are getting married next year, and I look forward to another generation. I had of late craving for some ritual, so I light candles Friday night, naming this week's special thing, and not forgetting the grandparents who made the trip. And this is good life.
Life is good. Life is good. Gale, we have one more slide up there with your metallic.
This
you
is
want to explain?
Something collected because I don't throw out things. And I had a junk drawer, and I got a piece of black thing, and I have keys and a watch and single earrings and scissors, and I have it in my desk. And other people like that.
It's very inventive.
Have a living room?
Yes, the living room is coming.
Okay.
There it is.
Those were the 11 high ceilings, and you can see the glass. It faces my dark wall, and I still have the paint on turquoise on my 11-foot ceiling. And that was the first project, and I was 4 panels, but the thick glass is 2, and that's a view from the outside. And I soldered it with foil, and I took on smaller projects after that.
That was a huge project.
Yes.
With those 4 panels in there. Yeah, quite a spectacular entry into the large room in your house, the welcoming room in your house. And that is, you're saying, the original paint on the ceiling?
Yes.
Okay. When you were pregnant with Randall, you were up there painting.
The next owner, and the carpet is turquoise, and the dining chairs are turquoise, and so I hung on to
the turquoise theme. And what about this gentleman?
Okay, and Steve once wore a beard, and he then shaved it off when it became white. And, and I think it was my 25th anniversary, and we had the party here, and we had tables around the race part, and we had a band and dancing, and it was a good place to have a party.
Steve, and your family group?
Steve, Elika, Tobin, me, Randall, and Beryl. Tobin lives in Chicago, the University of Chicago, and Beryl is touring the West Coast with a friend now. And our dog, part of the family. I have no pets now. I outlive them.
Gale, you've led a remarkable life, an absolutely remarkable life, and you've made so many contributions to this beloved church community and the city of Davis. Everything from the Campfire Girls to the design review commissions, the historical resources, the family groups supporting your children growing up. Thank you very much for those contributions, and I'd like now to open this up to the audience so they can ask you questions. Let's give her some applause. If you would raise your hand so Gale can acknowledge you if you have a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Gale, didn't you design the over part of a bridge, the plantings and things?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah. Yeah, my memory is not good. I had forgotten that. That was, Doug was one of the first people I met in Davis, and I was surprised when he resurfaced at the church recently.
Doug McComb, yes, wonderful. Are you referring to the bridge that goes to the Bridge House?
Yes.
No.
There's a bridge that goes from over the highway.
Oh, that one, yeah. Yeah, because
You drive by and you see all these bushes and stuff on top of the bridge, and I think that Gale designed it.
Yes, because someone on my committee wanted trees to go on the bridge, and I was doodling, and I had my thing, and I said, this is the planters that connect East Davis from South Davis, and we had planters and bushes because the roots didn't have much room for it, and that's how that happened.
So that's the bridge that connects North and South Davis, right? At what street is that? Pole line, the pole line overcrossing.
Oh, yeah.
So that was part of your design input. Wow.
Yeah.
You forgot to tell me that one.
Yeah, I forgot that I did that. I forgot a lot.
Thank you for that. Other questions?
And
Gale, I know you've worked as an architect and have a lot of achievements in that area, but you didn't mention in your memories about going to architecture school.
that was in Pratt. And Berkeley took me as a transfer, and I graduated Berkeley with an architectural degree. And we went on 2 sabbatical. Life was interrupted. We went to Lima, Peru, and Amsterdam, and Bill Strain took over the mid-century modern, and there were no lots when I came back, so I turned to the city and things, that I had planning meetings with the city, and because I interested in city planning too. So I did lots of things.
Yes?
I'm really impressed by the stained glass window project, the 4 panels. I'm wondering how you learned.
I had a friend another thing, I was doing with the children's set design, and I met a friend, and she was a really good artist, and I went to her house, and I said I wanted to do something, and she said, why don't you make it stained glass? And I said, I never did stained glass, and she said, I'll show you how. And she had a studio, and we worked together on it, and that was the outcome of it, and consequently, I made mirror frames for Christmas gifts, and we had melted fused glass projects, and I like glass. And Genevieve and I painted for years, and we had the same eye, so we corrected each other's painting. They improved, and it was nice for painting. And for several years before she died, I was absent from house and housework and painted seriously.
Yes.
Gale, I know you have the opportunity to travel a lot. Can you tell one of your couple of memorable travel stories?
Steve wanted to go places for a year, but he didn't like traveling. He thought that something would go wrong, which it did, and he said, "You go travel on your own." So I had Europe, England, and Spain, and I think that I covered most of the countries, Romania and Russia and Scandinavia, and I went on tours because that was the efficient use of my time and money, and I liked having a PhD for a tour guide because that was a respected job in most countries. I went to Egypt and Israel. That was the first one because I wanted to go to the two places, and I went with tours. And when Steve died, my children said, "We want to go on a trip," and I said, I had my last trip. They said, "We'll go with you." So I had in my bucket Thailand and the Southeast. When I looked at Architectural Digest, I always chose which one the houses would I choose, and I would influenced by Japanese and Southeast Asia. And my house was before Strain, and one of a Japanese house was influenced me when I designed it, surprisingly. And Tobin couldn't, his wife couldn't go, and Beryl and Elika and I went on a cruise down the river. And I loved it because we stopped at the villages and looked at the crafts and silk. And silk was a thread of a plant. It wasn't and I just love traveling, and I like the villages. People turn on the scenery, and I like scenery, but that's not my first love.
Are you referring to the trip you made to Myanmar?
Yes.
With your family, to the country of Myanmar, formerly called Burma. And you lovingly shared some photos with me of that trip. One is memorable in that you were on the back of a porter who was carrying you through the sandy beach down to the cruise ship. I love that photo.
With the river was low because that was the not rainy season, and I didn't expect the bank, no steps or anything, and I was the oldest people on the ship, and they had one of the staff hold my hands on upwards, and the way down on one was too steep, and I don't weigh that much, so and I rode piggyback.
Riding piggyback in your 90s, right?
No, 80s. No. 80s, yeah. I'm not
that was
90 yet.
Okay, that was in your 80s.
Yeah.
All right, let's clarify that. Great, thank you. Are there other questions for Gale?
So.
Anything else you would like to add, Gale?
No. don't remember anything offhand that was important. I think we covered it.
We covered a lot of ground. Yes, we did.
Yeah,
and
I led a full life.
you've led a very full life, a very active life, a very positive life, and been very involved in the community and in this church. And for that, we thank you very much for sharing your story today.
Thank you.